KIW.
We're doing it.
Episode 4, yeah. Today we're going to talk about, for already, because I got ADHD.
Empathy.
Yes, today we're talking about empathy. But first,
I tried to do one neurodivergent content person and one not. One just regular thing that I like. So the regular thing that I like, which also I suspect that this person is neurodivergent in some way. And once I start explaining, you'll probably understand why. But she's on TikTok. The TikTok handle is JT Mobile Detailing.
Whoa.
She's a detailer. Her name is Jessica Tran. And she posts car detailing videos.
That sounds super neurodivergent.
Yeah, and she is I honestly she's down in, I think she's in Long Beach or somewhere in Southern California. And I'm I actually want to take my car to her because she knows so much about detailing. And it's super interesting. I've never been interested in detailing cars. That's never been a thing that I've glommed onto. But I saw her videos. The first videos I saw of hers was her she posts videos of her detailing the car. So it's step by step of her cleaning these cars inside and out. And it's so satisfying. I like cleaning videos like that. So you start with a hot mess and it ends just pristine and it's great. So I started watching her videos, but then she explains everything. And she's super funny too, so she's pretty entertaining. So I love her videos. So anybody that likes cleaning videos or gets satisfaction out of watching other people clean things.
I love that. I had no idea how many sensory videos that I would end up following.
Yeah.
Cake decorating, cookie decorating, anything that's that tactile visual stuff is super addicting. Yeah. My first one is Jeremy Andrew Davis, and I think this is perfectly timed because we are talking about empathy today, and he does a good video about empathy. And that was actually what sparked a lot of my curiosities that I want to kind of hash out with Melissa today. But I love him because he does a lot of explainer videos on autism. I believe he has both autism and ADHD, but he does a lot of really informative experience type videos, to kind of help a neurotypical understand what the autistic experience is and what's helpful and what ways we can interact with each other that's actually helpful for an autistic person rather than perpetuating stereotypes and whatnot.
Okay, my second one is also someone from TikTok. Her TikTok name is Sound of the Forest. Her real life name is Nicole. I feel like she's young. But then I don't know, because some neurodivergent people particularly autistic people, but I think there are a lot of ADHD people too that seem or look so much younger than they are, so I just never know.
There's two things that could be contributing. One is common with autism is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which makes your skin super elastic, which tends to make people look very young. The other thing is, if it's just demeanor, the ADHDers, we never grow up, so.
Yeah, I feel this person is she's very excited in all of her videos, and she just has a childlike quality about her, which I love, personally. So maybe that makes her seem younger too, but she looks young. She collects different types of bugs and butterflies and things and preserves them and frames them, and she knows so much about all of those types of things. And she posts a lot about that. She posts a lot about autism, kind of explainer type of things, and just talking about her experience as an autistic person and stuff. She's just adorable. I love people that are just being authentically themselves, and you can just tell that she totally is, and I love it.
Yeah, and some people are just so watchable.
Yeah.
Even if they're just doing nothing or talking about nothing, you're just I like being in your presence.
I'm I love you. You're so fun.
Yeah.
You're not even doing anything, but you're making me smile. So
awesome.
Yeah, I really like her content.
My second one is someone that I've recommended multiple times because she's extremely educational about specifically ADHD medication, but all psych meds. And her name is Your Psych Pharmacist. She's also very engaging. She's super relatable, and does these cool digital visuals behind her. She goes into a lot of scientific jargon that may be kind of over your head, was over my head at first, but you can kind of get the gist of what she's saying. You can come away with it with kind of an idea of how things work. So it's really informative, and I know that the meds journey is really, really difficult because most doctors don't know what the hell they're doing. So often we have to spoon feed our doctors with information based on our own experiences and based on our own research. Definitely, if you're having meds questions or concerns, go to her page because she covers so many psych meds.
Okay, so getting into our main topic.
Empathy.
This is a hot button topic for the autistics.
I would imagine.
So you said you had some specific things you wanted to talk about or ask about?
I guess we can start with stigma. I mean, it sounds like there's some stigma about empathy. I'm not super hooked into the autistic community yet. Like, I have a lot of autistic friends, but I don't hear a lot of the narrative. So I do like to hear some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like this long-standing misconception that autistic people, one of like the hallmarks of being autistic is that you don't have empathy or you have no clue how to feel for other people or anything like that, which is not true.
Or how other people are feeling.
How other people are feeling or how to relate in any sort of way that involves feelings or anything like that. You know, what? Empathy.
Sure.
So, huge misconception.
I will say that when I looked up empathy, like the definition, I found so many different, like, concepts. The way I've always thought of it, because the way people describe empathy is, oh, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I take that very literally of, like, pretending I'm that person, like putting myself and just imagining that I am them, like being an actor, you know? But then as I was looking up definitions, that was more like, oh, just understanding where they're coming from or understanding what their struggle is. It's like, okay, well, can we pick one? Because it seems like there's a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and like there are places that I've researched about this too that have made it seem like empathy, like you can only have empathy for something if you actually, like when you empathize with something, that means that maybe you've been through that thing before. And if you sympathize, it can be, or maybe I'm getting that backwards. If you sympathize, then it means that you can like only like imagine what that, or you can like feel bad about the thing, but you haven't ever actually been through it. So I don't know, it seems to be like there's a lot of weird like differing definitions, but I think the summary of it all is just like relating to someone when they're having a feeling.
So the way I always understood sympathy was like feeling bad for someone. So there's automatically an emotion of, aw, poor thing. When empathy doesn't necessarily have to be something bad. It could just be, you know, oh, I understand what it's like to be a pilot. You must, you know, travel all the time.
Okay.
So there's not, it's not always sad. We don't always need empathy in sad situations. So that's how I kind of differentiate it. I don't know. I'd love to hear.
That's true. I've never really thought about it that way. Because really, usually when we think about empathy, I feel like, at least for me, the default setting is like thinking like, oh, if someone's having a hard time, being able to be empathetic.
Right. Yeah, that's usually when it causes a problem, I think. And especially in disorders. Like, nobody really cares if you know what it's like to be a pilot, but people care if you know what it's like to hurt.
Yeah, true.
There's two things that really kind of sparked this in my head. One was Jeremy Andrew Davis's video about empathy. He goes into 4 different types of empathy. And it kind of confused me because, first of all, there wasn't a reference that I could find, so I didn't know where he got this. I'd really like to see the source and where they're speaking from. It does sound more like a psychological thing than something that's based like in science. So the first one was cognitive empathy, and that was what we were talking about, like just knowing that somebody has a struggle or knowing about someone and just you know, just cognitively thinking, oh yeah, that must be difficult. The second one was responsive empathy, and that was where someone takes action on behalf of someone else. But the thing is, like, empathy really is just an experience. It's like an internal experience, right? So whether you do something or not doesn't really change the experience that we're having. You know what I mean? Like, if you can have the same experience and not take action on someone's part. So that one I didn't really agree with. Then, or at least it confused me. The third one was affective or emotional empathy, and he described something like he was sitting next to his friend and his friend was describing something that happened to him, and there was an emotional response from the listener. Maybe watching a movie, okay, this is timely because today I watched Lewis, starts with a C, it's a super sad video about a dog. Anyway.
Oh no, not sad videos about dogs.
I know, and it's like it's going viral and being famous because nobody can watch it without crying. So that's a great kind of example of what he's talking about, affective or emotional empathy, is because you're seeing something unravel and it incites emotion. But again, I feel like that doesn't really speak to the experience that you're having or what your brain is doing. It really just speaks to your emotional state at the time. You know what I mean? But maybe I can go with that one a little more than the other. The fourth one was somatic, and this one I think is really interesting because this one I feel like relates to mirror neurons, and I want to get into that as well. I use the example of when you see someone stub your toe, do you go, ooh, ouch? you know, because you're kind of acting like you're that person. You're relating to that person as if that's you, as if it's you that's stubbing your toe. And I was talking to my boyfriend about this when we were watching a rock climbing show where people were rock climbing and the tension was really high, and I'm biting my nails and shivering and like, oh God, and he slips and I go, and I'm looking at my boyfriend and he's totally cool as a cucumber. And I started to kind of dig in and go, when you're watching this, like, do you feel tense? And he says, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, so do you feel like you're on that rock? And he goes, sometimes, yeah, I feel like I'm on that rock. And I go, so when his hand slips, do you feel like your hand is slipping? No. I'm worried for him, but I don't feel like that's my hand. So that I feel like is some sort of disconnect that happens. And here's why I feel like that's what relates to mirror neurons. So if you've been through Psych 101, you may have read about mirror neurons. And it's these brain cells that are found in a very specific region of the brain. Now, mind you, this was a study that was done on 10 white male autistic people. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt. But what they found was really interesting because they really dove into a very granular level. And what they found was they measured someone's brain, the autistic person's brain, while they were watching someone use an object. And basically the bottom line, the moral of the story was that there were all sorts of reactions and relationary interactions with the person, but the one place where the autistic person's brain didn't light up, but the neurotypical's brain did light up, was in relation to imagining that that's them holding the ball or interacting with the object. So just like we were talking about, there's just that they don't imagine that that's them. There's no kind of layer of relationary empathy happening. And I would love to kind of run that by autistic people to see, do you have this experience? It also made me wonder if so I then played an empathy exercise myself and imagined what it was like to be a baby just learning about the world and not being able to relate to anyone as they're trying to teach me words, as they're trying to teach me how to do things. You really can't learn by observation, right? Because you're just seeing things happening. You don't know how they relate to your body. So everything you have to do has to be experiential. Mm-hmm. It has to be from your own experience. And so, verbal delays, right? Coordination. So they talk about how autism often comes with a lack of coordination. But there's all these things where it's going to be hard to learn things because you have to kind of take a different route. You have to take the long way with your brain. But maybe that's also why a lot of great intelligence is associated with autism, because people have to take the long way with their brain. So they're exercising parts of their brain that other people aren't. Thoughts?
My thoughts on that are that when you are doing these sorts of, or this type of research on like a very narrow portion of the population, like we said, white males.
Right, 10 of them.
And also like typically a very specific type of autistic person has been studied or research, involved in all this research study. Because there are a lot of us out there who, for me, I was a very early talker. I was a very early walker. I was a very, very early reader. My mom was just telling me recently that I started reading when I was barely 3 years old, and I had memorized the books that she would read to me every night. It's a neurotype that exists in extremes. So it's like, you're either like delayed at something or you're super quick at something. You're either like super coordinated or you're super uncoordinated. Like, not across the board, and I'm not like a psychologist and I haven't studied this, but...
Yeah, kind of like how ADHD is either can't pay attention to anything or is way too focused on the wrong thing.
Yeah. There's also like the part of autism that's like, some people have very like hyper sensitivities, and some people have hypo sensitivities. Like a lot of it is like you're either super sensitive or you don't feel a thing on this. So maybe when it comes to empathy too, that might be the same type of experience, you know? Because for me personally, I do find that there are certain situations where I have so much empathy that it's overwhelming, and then I find that other times I struggle really hard with empathy. I think people misunderstand also what the feeling of not being able to empathize is like. I feel like people relate not having empathy or having a low amount of empathy in certain situations as being like sociopathic behavior or psychopathic behavior, or you don't care about anyone or anything. And that's, I feel like that's definitely false too. I mean, yeah, psychopaths don't have empathy or compassion or anything like that, but it's a different flavor with autism where it's like, I'm not a terrible person. Like I can see that a person in front of me is having an experience. My brain will not like figure out a way to click in and like relate to that and be like.
I think of it like insects, where like I see a fly on the wall, and I understand that it's gonna suck to get smashed, but I don't feel like I'm a fly. I don't imagine what it's like to be a fly. I don't really go into it. I just, tough, smash.
Yeah. Yeah, flies are really annoying. I usually don't kill bugs, but I will smash a fly for sure. They are the most annoying. There's two different brands of empathy inside Melissa. It's like, it's either a cognitive experience for me or like a emotional experience for me. So like the cognitive experience is what I was explaining, where I'm like, a person, let's say they're having a hard time, and I can cognitively know that that person's having a hard time, and then I can think about what I am supposed to do in this situation to try and help. Then there's the emotional side where it's like, if I watched the video of the dog, something happens to the dog or it dies or something.
It's like it's a bunch of sad stuff about
a bunch of sad stuff. So like probably that would make me cry. Like, so there are times where I like feel the thing and I'm like, oh God. And you can like, it's a feeling, you feel it, and it's you can't control it, and it's in there. But then there are other times where it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could like switch this on right now. Like I want to feel it, but I can't make myself feel it. And I don't know why, and it's unpredictable for me. There are certain situations where I would think that I would either be one way or the other, and it goes the opposite direction.
But it's consistent as far as the kind of situation, yeah?
Not
or is
always.
It like random every day? You don't know how you're gonna feel in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't. It's pretty unpredictable. I mean, there are certain things that always get me. Like I'm really, really, really bad with death and dying, that kind of stuff. So for an example, I have a friend who lost her wife. She like opened up and shared with me like how the final days were and stuff. And I felt like I was experiencing the thing. I was so uncomfortably sad to the point where I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can like handle this feeling, just because all of the descriptions of like just being with someone in their final days. And like sometimes empathy like that is easier for me if I've actually been through the thing. That's a huge thing that makes empathy easier for me, is if like, oh, I went through that, and then I can put myself in that person's position because I've been in that position. But I've never lost my wife, and I've never lost anyone like super, super close to me.
So I wonder if this has anything to do with emotional dysregulation, because I've always been super mega highly emotional all the time. Even when my head is super cool as a cucumber and it's like, there's nothing all that bad going on right here. There's nothing really to be upset about. And meanwhile, my nerves are like, and I'm like, I swear I don't mean to be crying right now. But what I've noticed is that when at the peak of my medication, I'm totally resilient.
Interesting.
But I don't have a difficult time with empathy. However, I've never tried to be more empathetic because I've always been overly empathetic. And so this is a new welcomed experience for me of being resilient. And so I've never been like, oh, I wonder if I could be more empathetic here. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not crying. So I don't know if it's a thing where like I have difficulty with empathy when I'm at my height of meds, or if it's just resilience where I just don't have to be. And I think it's resilience, because I can still turn on a Pink song and cry.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just resilience, but I do notice that my attitude towards people is a little less sensitive. It's just a little like, hey, we all go through that.
Yeah.
Get your shit together.
and I don't think empathy necessarily has to do with like, that's just the examples we're coming up with, is like crying. Because you can definitely be an empathetic person and not be a crier.
Yeah, absolutely. You can feel things that don't show on the outside.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like that also happens to me a lot, where I'm feeling something inside, but it's not coming out the way that people would expect on the outside, which I think is a very autistic thing. I think that logic plays into my ability to be empathetic sometimes too, because I do sort of have a very logical and like problem solver way of thinking. And to me, sometimes if someone is like upset or worried about something that to me has a simple and obvious solution, as humans, sometimes we get stuck on things and we like to vent to our friends or the people around us and whatever. And sometimes if I feel like, well, there's a simple solution to this, why are you so upset about it? Like, just, if you're unhappy if you're so unhappy at your job, just look for another job. Or like, if this thing is making you miserable, you know, do this thing.
Right.
Like, here are the steps. And like, why aren't you taking them? But I know that it's not that easy, you know, but in my mind, I'm like, steps A, B, and C, and you're good.
Yeah.
But you can't say that to people who, I learned, you can't say that to people who are upset because they'll think you're being an asshole. So.
Yeah, and I'm not totally on board with that, because in my head, like, you look like an asshole if you say, but just quit your job, because it's not that simple. Okay, well then tell me why it's not that simple, because I'm clearly not getting the full picture.
Yeah.
And so if you tell me, oh, because they have given me health insurance and I'm way at the salary and nobody will take me at an entry level, blah, blah, blah. You know, if they can kind of paint the picture for me, then yeah, I'm crying with you. Now I'm upset. Mm-hmm. But if I'm just seeing it as simply as just quit your job, I guess there's kind of a level of like benefit of the doubt. Like, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that there's more to this story, and it's not just that you can just want to quit your job.
Yeah. See, I want the whole story. Just tell me the whole story, and then maybe I'll understand.
Yeah. I think in those situations, I don't say just quit your job. I would say just like, so what is keeping you from quitting your job? Because I'm the same way. Like, I want to get to the bottom of it. Like, there's a disconnect here. You're crying, and I don't think you should be crying. So what's missing here? Yeah. But there is always like the details that fill that in, and then you're on the same level. So I don't know.
Yeah. Or even worse, an even worse situation is when there isn't really a solution. Like, sometimes, like, my friend's wife died. Yeah, like, she died, and that's the end of that story, and, like, there's nothing to be done about it. You just have to grieve it. Those situations are really hard for me. I'm not good at all, because I don't know, I literally don't know what to say or where to take the conversation, because for me, I'm like, okay, logically, how do you deal with this? What's a plan we can make to help with this? How do we, like, sort this out? And if there's a problem that doesn't really have a solution like that, you know, if you have a friend that's, like, going through a breakup, it's like, that's just gonna fucking suck for a while, and I don't really know what else to say, like, beyond that, except, like, I'm sorry.
See, now, this is where I feel like we kind of switched places here, where you need resolve. You're unsettled until you can find a solution, and we can close the chapter.
Yeah.
But I will just sit in the hurt with them and be like, ooh, boy, that sucks. And I don't need I do usually need a solution, but if it's just that this sucks and there's no solution, I can live with that.
Yeah, okay. Maybe that's
like
why
space.
I'm so bad with, like, space, like your problem with space. Now I get it. Yeah, maybe that's why one of the reasons why I'm so bad with death.
Yeah.
Is because there is no solution to death. There's nowhere to go from here. It's just the person died and now they're gone, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
So, like,
let's just sit here and be miserable.
And the finality of death is hard for me too. But that could be one of the things that's like, that's really just like,
it makes your brain crazy because it doesn't know what to do about it, how to solve it.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to solve the problem. There are a lot of people out there right now talking about, like, how to relate to, like, a partner or a friend or something if there's something going on with them, and saying, like, do you want me to listen, or do you want me to, like, help you solve the problem? And I am terrible at the just listening, and I, like, understand that sometimes people just need you to listen and not try and solve the problem for them.
And
or
that's
with them.
something I don't get behind either, because the only time that I just want someone to listen is if they give crappy advice. Is if I think I know the answer better than you do.
Yeah.
You know? So,
I will say there are a lot of times when I'm complaining about something when I don't really want an answer, though, because every answer that the person gives me, I'm like, no. I can't tell you why it's no, but I'm just like, no.
Well, maybe that's why you're upset, though, is because that's not an option for you, so you're stuck in this place that's uncomfortable.
True.
I do get frustrated if someone keeps trying to throw me solutions, and I'm like, no, you're dumb. You're being dumb. You know, obviously I don't say that, but, like, in my head, I'm just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, just please stop talking.
Yeah.
And then because then I have to, like, you know me, I have language processing issues, so I don't grab the words that I need right away. So it takes a great deal of effort to tell them why their idea sucks. Yeah. And then they throw more ideas at me, and I'm like, no, that sucks because this and this and this. And, like, all you're doing is stressing me out more. And so it escalates, because now I'm stressed out trying to grab words to explain to you why your ideas suck. And I'm also still upset at the thing that I'm upset about.
Yeah. Yeah, it just makes everything more stressful.
Yeah.
That's funny, like, processing speeds could also affect your reactions in the moment that can maybe come, like, for me, sometimes if something happens, my emotion about it happens later, because I am kind of like a slow processor when it comes to things where it's like, I need time to like digest this and think about it, and time for my brain to be like, what is happening? And then I can like know how I feel about it really. Later on, after I've processed, I'll be like, oh, like I should have probably said this thing in the moment or did this thing in the moment, like, but then those emotions aren't really coming to me until later when you're like, oh, now that I've thought about this for a while, like now I can see why that person was upset, or like, you know, it just sometimes doesn't hit me until later. So so I don't think that we can talk about empathy without talking about the double empathy problem. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
I came prepared with notes. I wanted to look this up online because I don't really like know how to explain it very well with my own words. But I found a website, reframingautism.org.au, and this theory was proposed by Dr. Damien Milton, who is actually autistic himself, and he's an autism researcher. So
love that. Love that.
His theory of double empathy proposes that autistic people do not lack empathy. Milton argues that autistic people experience the world and express emotions differently to non-autistic people. Correct. We communicate, experience, and display emotions, interact with others, form relationships, and sense the world around us differently to non-autistics. That doesn't mean that we don't have emotions or feel empathy, but it makes it difficult for non-autistic people to understand and empathize with us and us with them.
Oh.
Autistic differences lead to different life experiences, which create a kind of empathy divide. So just as it could be said that autistic people lack social insight into non-autistic culture and communication, it could also be said that non-autistic people lack social insight into autistic culture and communication. So Milton calls the disconnect a double problem because both autistic and non-autistic people experience a lack of understanding for the other group. So this is super interesting because as neurodivergent people, as you know, how many people can you pick out in your life who you've been drawn to that are also autistic or ADHD? Like when I started researching, I got my diagnosis and everything, I was like, oh, it seems like everyone around me is sort of like the same as me. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're all really drawn to each other somehow, some way, and we all end up in these little clumps, is because we do kind of all speak the same language and understand each other on like a deeper level, and we don't have that double empathy problem.
Yeah, and there's definitely people within the neurodivergent spectrum, for lack of a better term, that I relate to more than others. And those are the people who are driven by their emotions. So someone who's talking to me with their whole body and their facial expressions and the tone of their voice is like, oh, I'm drawn to that person. But someone who's like this and is not, like, has a monotone voice, and I'm focusing on their words, which is really difficult for me. And I wonder how much of that is just because of the language processing problem. Like I rely on all of the other cues because the language processing isn't there. And so if I'm really listening to your words, I'm gonna hone in on words and get hung up on things that like aren't consistent, and I feel very confused, and then I feel misunderstood, and then it's a whole spiral.
It's a whole spiral. So are you drawn to people that are more similar to you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Which I think
it's
as a species,
Sure.
I feel like that is generally how it goes. And you know, like when you meet someone sometimes and you just like click, which doesn't happen super often for me personally. Like I can think of a very small handful of people that I'm like, oh, I feel really comfortable around that person, and like something like just vibes there. But I think they are the people that sort of are most similar to us in ways that kind of matter to us personally.
For sure, where it's just easy.
Yeah, which doesn't necessarily mean like the person has to outwardly be exactly like you, because, for instance, my partner, my significant other, we are very opposite in a lot of ways. They have ADHD, but they're not diagnosed autistic, but now we are like...
But we have suspicions.
Because their outward emotional expression is very, I'm a very like, very talkative, very with my hands, very animated, like, I'm all over the place, and Gray is more like, just sort of sit and take everything in and listen and like...
Choose their words carefully.
Never, like, my emotions is like this, it's like a uppy downy, and Gray is just like... and then there's like a little blip, and it's like, and it doesn't mean that they're not an emotional person. It's just like the outward expression of that emotion is like not expressed in the same way that mine is. And we get along great, and we understand each other, and we're very comfortable with each other. But I think it's just maybe sometimes an underlying thing that you can't really pick out about that person.
Sure.
Where it's like...
Yeah, there is something about them that is drawing you to them. And it could be something that has been a big trigger for you your whole life, or been a big struggle, and suddenly you don't have to worry about that one thing with them, you know?
Yeah.
So I have actually had that struggle in my relationship because same dynamic. I'm extremely animated, I'm extremely affectionate. I say I love you to my friends, even my guy friends, like a super duper, you know, emotional, affectionate, animated. And he is very reserved, dry, very, not stone face, it's...
Yeah, no, I know. I can't think of the word either.
Damn it.
I hate that.
He's got a permanent poker face,
Yeah.
okay? So,
Gray too,
but when he
very
smiles, he
poker
just
face.
like lights up the whole room. It's adorable, but anyway. But a lot of people think that he's like a serial killer. They think that he's like scary and that he hates them.
Yeah.
Because he's just keeps that poker face on all the time. And it's been really, really difficult for me to understand. He'll tell me something, like usually when you say, oh, this movie is coming out, you do it in like oh, this movie's coming out. And so now I know you're excited about it, and I go, oh, cool, right? Mm-hmm. But it'll just be, this movie is coming out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, are we happy about that? Or like, yeah. Yay? Or, ugh, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And then the other problem is, I don't know when he's joking. Because he'll just flat out lie about something. And I'll be like, I don't know how to, is this something I should yes and? I don't know how to yes and a lie. I don't know if he's being for real. Like, do you really want? So there's a lot of like, I'm gonna do this, and he'll say something super crazy, and I'll be like, okay, honey, we can do that if you want to. And he'll be like, I'm just kidding. I'm like, I know.
Oh, yeah, I totally knew that.
If you weren't, I wanted to be supportive, so.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's funny that you said that about, like, the serial killer thing, because before we, Gray and I knew what we knew about neurodivergence and autism in particular, Gray would always be like, do you think I'm a sociopath? Do you think I'm, like, a psychopath, maybe? Like, why? Because Gray, like, hardly ever cries. Like, we've been together 6 years, and I feel like I've seen them cry, like, 3 times. Mm. Like, just not an outwardly emotional person, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, like, very flat, very dry. And they've always been like, I feel like there's something, like, wrong with me, but I know Gray as a human, and I'm like, they're one of the most empathetic people I know. Like, they feel things very deeply, maybe even deeper than I do, but it just doesn't convey on the surface as people would want it to. To be honest, this is how people want you to be, for them, for their sake. Just like you just said, you know, I need these cues. I feel like across the board, it's harder to read people if you're not getting, like, a response out of them that you can read. Right. That experience with Gray reminded me of a fellow creator friend that I have who had a platform of borderline personality, which I think we discussed earlier. I have a psychologist friend who believes that borderline is just ADHD with, like, childhood neglect and childhood abuse. Mm-hmm. Totally checks out here, because she later got a diagnosis of ADHD. But she texted me once and was like, I just got a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, which is the new name for sociopath. Okay. And I was like, and she just, like, she went along with it. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're one of the biggest people pleasers I've ever known. Like, half of your text end with sorry, I blah, blah, blah. Yes, if you didn't have empathy, you wouldn't be apologizing because you wouldn't think that I was inconvenienced. Like, there's no way that this is okay for you. Yeah. You obviously aren't conveying something in these sessions that, you know, that I'm seeing. Yeah. So it's really interesting where that disconnect is. And that is very harmful. Absolutely. Where people are getting diagnosed things that they're not. Yeah. But I feel like, can we have the Jeffrey Dahmer conversation? Yeah. Because we're talking about empathy, and here's the thing. I've been following Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't want to say following. It's not like I'm a follower. It's not like I'm like fan.
Him. Right, I'm not a fan. It's just that I found him very fascinating. Since somewhere around like 2001, I saw an interview with him and his parents, and he talked about how he actually wanted to get caught because he didn't like hurting people. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, you don't hear this from other serial killers. Like, this is a differentiating characteristic. Yeah. And so and of course, you know, ever since I've read everything that I could find on him, because I just found it so fascinating, and I wanted to know what that mechanism was. How could you feel for people but also kill them? And so then when I watched that Dahmer series, it became very clear that, like, this is an example of different types of empathy. I certainly could not saw someone's arm. I can't even watch needles get punctured into skin. It, sends a shiver up my spine. But, so he would drug his victims because he didn't want them to feel pain. So there's clearly some sort of empathetic factor there, but it didn't translate into the physical, sensory, like cutting people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And obviously there's some sort of cognitive empathy of like, this person's life is ruined and they have, family members who love them and stuff like that. So there's obviously a barrier there too.
Yeah.
But I found him very fascinating because I don't see that with other serial killers. That's the only one who actually like doesn't want the person to hurt, and like there's a sense of care there.
Yeah. Super, super interesting. I agree. I always found that also fascinating about Jeffrey Dahmer. Are there a lot of neurodivergent people that really are fascinated by serial killers?
I think there are.
I mean, I think there are a lot of people in general, but like for some reason, I don't know, I feel like a lot of neurodivergent people I know are into like true crime. But
and psychology.
Another one that I've thought about in regards to empathy is like how you can have empathy and care for certain people and not for others. One of my serial killer who I have always been fascinated by is the Green River Killer. I feel like I'm so fascinated with him in part because he was killing in the Seattle area in the 80s, and I grew up in the Seattle area in the 80s. So like I remember as a kid and an adolescent, like it was on the news all the time, Green River Killer, another killing. And he had a wife and kids. That to me was like shocking because I'm like, how can you go out and kill women and then go home to your wife and like have a relationship where like if you're married to someone for years and years and years, like it's so strange to me how you can be two totally different people and you can live with someone and love them and not hurt them or have the urge to hurt them, and then you can go out and you're like a different person where you're like have no regard for this other person who you're killing and you're taking them away from their family.
Well, if I may.
Yeah.
Because there are killers who kill their own family and their children. Like the dude who put his kids down a well just because he was cheating on his wife. And that's like, they really are like faking it their entire life, right? That's gotta be it. Like, they're just like going through the motions because this is what you do with life is I get married and I kiss her and I say I love you and then I have kids and we go, aw, aren't they cute? So you just, but they have everybody fooled. That's scary.
Yeah, that's a whole other kind of monster.
But that is a true antisocial personality disorder.
That is a true psychopath for sure. I mean, all of these killers that we talked about are true psychopaths. But it's funny how empathy ties into that. And we're not trying to relate psychopath behavior to autistic behavior or experience at all. But we're just talking about different types of empathy and how they show up in the world. And it's interesting hearing about your experience and your partnership and how it's similar to mine. And I wonder like if there are other neurodivergent people that are kind of drawn to another neurodivergent that's sort of like opposite of them, because I like that balance between us, because sometimes I can honestly like overstimulate myself, like sometimes I just get like very excited or very hyper or very, and the fact that Gray is so like, I'm up here
grounding.
And Gray is so like down here usually. Like today I was upset about something and I was like on the verge of crying. I had like the weird lump that I hate. And I'm like, I'm going to cry about this thing and it's the middle of the day and I don't want to cry and then my eyes are going to be all puffy and then my contacts aren't going to feel right and I got to record the podcast later and I don't want to. And I'm like, ooh. And Gray was just like, well, it's okay. And here's this thing that I'm going to say that's going to be calm, and then I'm going to give you a really tight hug, and all of my calm energy is going to somehow be like, oh. And I'm like, okay. Wow. And then I like felt better, and I was like, wow. Oh, all right.
That's
okay.
Great.
I'm all right. I'm like, you're my own personal like weighted blanket.
Yeah,
you're just
I love that. Because for me, it's like, it's the opposite, because I feel like a total basket case if someone is totally straight-faced in the face of my emotion, because it just provides this contrast that just illuminates, like exaggerates all my emotion and makes me feel like a totally emotional basket case. And the other thing is, I was talking about how I'm super like affectionate and animated with friends, and so for somebody who's not used to that, that looks like flirting.
Oh.
So there's a lot of interpreting my stuff as flirting and getting upset. And it's like, well, the person I'm talking to doesn't think I'm flirting with them. Like, if you just ask them, like, do you think Courtney has the hots for you? They'd say no.
Yeah.
So, but it's good that you have, it works as kind of a balancing thing for you.
It does, because when I'm like up here, if the person is matching me, then I'm like, ooh, and then I start to get up here. And then if they get up here, then I'm like, good. It just keeps going up and up and up. And I wonder if that has something to do with maybe our backgrounds, like our childhood things.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because I grew up in a very volatile, high energy type of home, like not in like necessarily a good way. So I feel like that calming presence to me is something that I need, because when it's like ramping up, if the other person's ramping up, I feel like it triggers something in me to be like, I have to outdo this. And even if it's like an excited thing, like if I hang out with, this is an empathy thing. I think if I hang out with someone, I feel like all this that we're talking about right now relates to empathy in one way or another, because you're sort of vibing off the other person and their emotions. But like, I love being around other like super talkative, like hyperactive people. Like I have a few friends that are like very high energy and whatever. And I was gonna say, and you know McKenna. Hi McKenna, if you're watching. But I have a few friends like that where it's like, I love that energy in people. But then after a while of being around someone so energetic, I start to feel really tired. And not because I'm tired of them.
Just neurologically spent.
But I feel like when I'm around someone, I'm like internally trying to match that excitement level. And I can only hold an excited amount of energy for so long before I crash and burn. And I feel like that's true for a lot of autistic people. That's why we can't go to parties for a long period. Like if we go to a party, then we have to go home and recover for at least like a day.
Yeah.
Like,
you have a new tattoo, Melissa.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything.
For people who are attention to detail, I am getting, I have this solar system tattoo, but I'm getting it covered because I didn't really like how it turned out. So
you're covering up space?
I am, but I'll get another space tattoo. So I'm getting it covered. It looks really good so far.
It's
so
funny,
happy about it.
I didn't notice it at first because it looks a lot like Jared's tattoo on his arm.
Oh.
Really?
Really?
But then I saw it all shiny and I was like, wait a minute.
There's like a bunch of gunk on it because I don't want it to get all dried out. But I'm going to go back on Tuesday and have the rest. It's going to get finished on Tuesday because this part obviously isn't covered yet. Another way that my empathy is a disconnect sometimes, speaking of tattoos, is like, I don't find tattoos bothersome. Like, I cognitively know that they hurt. Like, when I'm getting tattooed, I'm like, ouch, that hurts. But it like doesn't make me... I just like look at my phone and I'm like, sometimes when people are getting tattooed, they have a really hard time. Cognitively, I know people have different pain tolerances and it's okay to be in pain. Mm-hmm. But then I'm thinking, like, I can't get on board with the fact that it hurts that bad.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't understand how that's hurting you so bad. Like, some people are like, oh God, ow, ooh, ugh. And I'm just like, no, it doesn't hurt that bad. Like, you're being dramatic. And I'm like, I don't say that, but I'm thinking that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. It's really disconnected.
But I'm like, that's so rude of me, because people experience pain differently.
Yeah.
And it can be like an actual neurological thing, it can be a cultural thing, there's a lot of things that go into how we experience pain in our bodies, and I'm just like...
Or how we express it. Like, maybe they're just more expressive. Yeah. I feel the same way with pain, for sure. That's one of those disconnect things where I'm just like, that's not painful. You don't know what a 10 is. Yeah. You know? You're not pissing yourself and screaming and crying at the same time. Yeah. You're not at a 10.
You're not at a 10. Yeah. Yeah, and that's... that plays into sometimes, like, my role as a nurse, as a healthcare professional, where sometimes you have to really step outside of yourself and be like, okay, I can't have judgment on this situation, because sometimes someone will be sitting there and they're just like, I'm talking to you right now, but they're like, you're like, what's your pain on a scale of 0 to 10? And they're like, oh, I'm at a 10. And I'm like...
If you're saying it like that, you're not at a 10.
I'm like, okay, I have a high tolerance for pain, but to me, I'm like, okay, my level 10 pain was when I was having my baby without pain medication, and that was a 10.
Yes.
And I was not sitting up talking to anybody plain as day.
Right.
I'm like...
Totally.
But then there can be other people who are like wincing and like hurt. You can like tell they're hurting and they're like, oh, I'm at like a 4. And I'm like, I feel like you're at more than a 4 though. It's just so weird to be like, how do we express the pain chart? The pain number scale has never made sense to me, really. Like, to me, that's like a totally illogical way to, there's gotta be some way to describe your pain, I understand, but like, because we do all feel it differently, but to me, I'm like, the pain scale, I don't feel like it's the way.
Or at least
the numbers are arbitrary, because what I perceive as a 10 is different from what you perceive as a 10.
Totally, yeah. And, or at least, like, get on the same page as, like, what the symptoms are or something. Excuse me, because I also have a pretty high pain tolerance, and I always get told when I, get shots and have tattoos and stuff that, oh, wow, you have really high pain tolerance. I don't feel like I do, but I guess I do. But then I've had back problems where getting out of bed made me scream, cry, piss myself. And that kind of pain, like the feeling like someone is sawing your body in half, That's a 10.
That sounds like baby having pain.
The tattoo, made me go, that's not a 10.
Yeah, that's like a 2 compared to that. So also, then it can be like, maybe some people have never experienced a 10.
Right, and so that's a 10 for them because it's the maximum that they've ever felt.
Exactly.
Silly.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, can we stop assigning
Yeah.
numbers to pain? It's weird. But anyway, really the notion that autistic people don't have empathy
Let's have empathy about empathy,
false.
okay?
Yeah, is false. You know, if someone is not expressing themselves the way that you want them to or would expect them to, that doesn't necessarily mean like that they're not feeling a thing.
Right,
you know,
or
some
understanding
people,
a
or
thing.
understanding a thing. Or maybe they don't understand the thing, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and it's not all going to be the same. Just because this person's autistic and this person is autistic doesn't mean they're going to have the same empathy issues. So if they even have them.
Yeah, exactly. False about the autistic people not having the empathy. We took about an hour to get to that conclusion. That basically the summation of that whole thing was that is false.
And now it's time for, what is this called?
Mythbusters!
This is where we talk about myths generally associated with autism and ADHD.
And we bust them.
We bust these myths. We just busted a myth with our whole empathy talk, but now we're going to bust some more myths. So my first one is related to autism, and that is that autistic people don't like or can't handle anything that is stimulating. So I think that there is this misconception about autistic people that we are like super sensitive and that we want to be over here in the corner with our headphones on and like no one touch me and don't look at me and don't ugh.
And that's, like, I'll admit, that's why I was surprised that you were a nurse. Because I'm like that, and I'm not like fully diagnosable autistic.
Yeah.
And I was stunned that you were a nurse because I was like, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
But
I don't
again,
know either,
everybody's
to be honest.
different.
Yeah, everybody's different. So, like, for example, I know that there are a lot of autistic people out there who seek out stimulatory experiences because that certain type of stimulation feels good to them. You know, there are a lot of autistic people, myself included, who love like amusement parks. You know, I do aerial arts. That's a really big form of like adrenaline type of stimulation. Like you're up in the air, you're falling towards the ground sometimes. Like it's so like there are moments where autistic people really love and crave certain types of stimulation. That's the thing where like some autistic people like to spin around in circles. Like that's a really common like outward autistic trait that sometimes is seen in kids where it's like, my daughter did this so much, was like spin, 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 like in a chair like this, just like spin forever. And it's like, that's a type of vestibular stimulation. Like it's doing something for that person that's, you know, calming or satisfying.
Yeah, that's why I like to spin
too. Yeah,
the hoop's my favorite apparatus because I get to spin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spin in the silks too, but
yeah.
That's the main, all the tricks, really, you kind of have to spin in order for it to look impressive and pretty on the hoop.
On the hoop, yeah. Sometimes I not like, you know, do something too loud around me when I'm not expecting it, and I will go cower in the corner and be like, but like, sure, I'll go to an amusement park and I'll go on a roller coaster. Like, that's my myth I want to bust.
It's great. My myth that I'm gonna bust is that ADHDers are bad at organization. And I even see this in like diagnostic criteria and stuff, and it makes me angry because we can actually be really great at organization. I can look at a desk and know exactly how to put things to where it's gonna be so intuitive and these all go in here, and nobody can dive into like a silverware drawer and organize it like I can. The problem is in the follow through. And there's the impulsivity, and there's also the lack of prioritization. So there's the impulsivity, we all know what that is, you just cannot deny your impulses. But then there's also like a big part of ADHD, and some people kind of almost like exclusively have this, and that is executive dysfunction. And so that's your brain's inability to properly prioritize and organize events and behaviors. So really what that leads to is just seeing a bunch of things and thinking, well, this is the most important right now. Or like dropping your pen and being like, it's not important right now, this is important. Even if picking up the pen is the most important thing, your brain is dopamine focused. So your brain is prioritizing whatever has the most dopamine. And then once you're medicated in that and your dopamine levels out, you have a different perspective and you go, oh, picking up the pen was the more important thing. I just didn't see it at the time. Or I was so stressed out that I didn't care. Like, or because I had that debilitating task dread and I just couldn't pick up the pen because the thought of it is paralyzing. So yeah, that we're not bad at organization. Stop it. We could fill out a planner like you wouldn't believe. It's looking back at the planner every day and referencing it that sucks.
Yeah. Okay. My second one is in regard to ADHD, and the myth I want to bust about ADHD is that people with ADHD can't sit still. And I think we touched on this a little bit in a previous episode where I mentioned that I didn't think I had ADHD because I don't have a problem sitting still sometimes.
And I think that kept us both largely from a diagnosis for a while.
Yeah, because I can for sure sit still when I'm engrossed in the thing that I'm sitting still for. So if something has my attention, I can sit still and do that thing for quite a long time, or pay attention to that thing or whatever. It's when I'm not engaged in a thing that I do have a hard time sitting still. Also, just because I'm sitting still, and I mentioned this before, it does not mean that my brain is being still, because those are two, I could be like,
yeah.
ta-da, like sitting just like perfectly, and you can't see inside my brain. It's like,
yeah.
But again, if I'm super interested in the thing that I'm sitting still for, my brain won't do that.
Yeah.
It's just, sometimes
it's like an engaging movie.
Yeah, that's
like that's why I love the movie theater, because it really brings me into the movie, and I can sit there the whole time because I am in the movie.
Okay. We'll have to talk about movie theaters.
Jared doesn't like movie theaters either.
Okay.
And
love-hate relationship. We'll have to remember that one.
Also, the people pleasers. Us people pleasers. That's the only reason I was able to sit still, is because I wanted to be a good girl and I wanted to get A's. But I'm building businesses, I'm having ideas, I'm dreaming about my future, I'm paying attention to absolutely everything except what I'm acting like I'm paying attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that can be very true, for sure. Yeah. It's a myth that ADHD people can't sit still.
We can. But sometimes it's painful.
Yeah.
So have a little sympathy.
Yeah.
Also, like, I didn't realize that not sitting still also meant you sit in a whole bunch of weird positions, because that's me. I cannot sit like just two legs side by side. I can't do it. My knee is up in my face, I'm sitting on my heel, I'm squirming around, and my legs are all pretzeled, and I just can't sit like a regular person.
Yeah. Same. And Gray, the one who got diagnosed with ADHD long before I did, literally like sits on the couch like this. If you can't see me, I'm just like sitting with just like my feet on the floor, my butt on the seat, my back against the backrest, and like my hands in my lap. And Gray's like this, and just like watching whatever we're watching. And I'm like this, and I'm like this, and I'm like I'm laying down, I'm sitting up, I sit on the floor and I stretch, and I'm like backwards and looking over my shoulder. It's just
massaging things. I'm like, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, just constantly moving around. Yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to bust the myth that ADHD people can't sit still.
No, we can, but we also can't at times.
Maybe sometimes prefer not to. It can be a preference.
I think I'm seeing a theme today of like, we're all different, guys.
Yeah,
so
it's the rainbow.
My second one is a favorite, and that is everyone's a little ADHD.
Yeah, not true.
I can't believe that we're still seeing people say this.
Yeah.
I still see it in my comment threads. Oh boy, okay, but here's the thing. I understand it, I have empathy. I have empathy for the people who say this, because the symptoms, the diagnostic criteria of ADHD is normal stuff. You know, it's not like schizophrenia where if you're hearing voices, you have it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's stuff like, you know, things that we all do. You forget your keys, you know, okay, everybody forgets their keys. It's the severity and frequency that defines the disorder. I'll say that again. It's the severity and frequency that defines the disorder. So, if you're doing it constantly, all day, every day, that's a disorder. If you do it once in a while and it doesn't impede in your life at all, then you're fine.
Yeah. I actually did a whole episode on this in relation to autism on my other podcast. And it's called, the title of the episode is very clickbaity. It's called There's No Such Thing as Autistic Traits. And it's true, because there aren't, like, the things that are autistic traits are things that affect, like, anyone can have these traits. But like you said, Courtney, and like I say in the episode over and over, it is the intensity, the frequency of these things and how they show up in your life. Right. Is it pervasive? Does it affect your day-to-day, you know?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of us stim. A lot of us, you know, there are a lot of people out there who maybe don't like loud noises, but what does that do to you? Like, how big of an effect does it have on you? Those sorts of things where it's like, and that's where I think people cross over into the like, oh, well, maybe we're all a little bit autistic, or maybe we're all a little bit ADHD. And it's like, no, you can't be like, oh, well, I got sad last week for a day, so like maybe we're all a little depressed. It's like, no, like depression,
well, that's another stigma
it's
too.
a thing.
Yeah.
Like like, you don't know what it's like to have depression if you're saying like, oh, well, I sometimes get sad, like, aren't we all a little depressed? And it's like, no.
This is something that's constantly causing disruption in your life and dysfunction in your life and, you know, creating huge obstacles in your life. That's a disorder.
Yeah. And, like, you wouldn't say that about any other disability. You wouldn't be like, oh, aren't we all a little quadriplegic? Like, like, that's just ridiculous. Like, sometimes
I have a back issue. I'm a little bit quadriplegic.
like, sometimes my foot falls asleep and I can't feel it for a minute. It's like, that's not the fucking same thing. I'm sorry. Like, that's how ridiculous it sounds to be like, oh, maybe we're all a little autistic. Also, then there is the thing that it's like, oh, well, if you're hearing all of this stuff about ADHD or autism and you're like, yeah, I do that too, and I do that too, and I do that too all the time, every day. Yeah. Then I'm like, well, maybe you are autistic.
Yeah. But and sometimes you don't know until you actually like take a minute and look at other people. Because I never knew because I was surrounded by people just like me. And I was so involved with what I was going through that I never stepped back and went, does everybody do this? Is this a problem? Well, that and like everything I was doing had a characteristic, had like a personality trait associated with it. So it was like, oh, you're an airhead, or you're flighty, or scatterbrained, or, you know, that stuff. And, you know, so that wasn't helpful. Yeah. So I just thought that I was a, you know, character flaw.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. Your point was...
I don't remember how we got there. This is the danger of having two people. Okay, so that's that for that segment. Yes. That's good. Okay, final segment of the day, which is gonna be...
And now it's time for...
Safe Space
Hot Takes!
Safe Space Hot Takes. This is a chance for us to plead our case on unconventional perspectives. I know a lot of us have unconventional perspectives about things.
And I wanted to do this segment because I think, like she said, a lot of us don't hold a lot of stock in like societal norms, and that's not always welcome. When we have opinions about things that are based in like logic or, you know, reason, it's not always welcomed. And, you know, there could be things here that we talk about that, you know, ruffle people's feathers, but let's just be nice because we know these are hot takes, and let's just allow this a safe space for people to get that out. And, you know, you can write in with your own hot takes and maybe we'll air them. But I just ask that you keep this a safe space for us because we need to have a place to be able to say these things.
Yeah, I'm sure many will agree with our hot takes, I think.
They're not going to be too offensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so my first one goes along with the whole empathy thing. And, you know, we were talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and serial killers and everything. I don't think that it's helpful for us to talk about people as monsters or say that they're evil, because it paints a picture that they are a separate being than we are. But they're actually human, and there is psychology behind their behaviors. And I think it's super duper important to see them as human and start to understand their behaviors and where they're coming from, because we have to learn how to prevent these things. So we need to look at what the environment was, what were the thought processes. And monsters and evil don't have thought processes, you know, humans do. So let's look at the human nature, let's look at the neuroscience, let's look at all of these factors that go into what happened in this tragedy, what happened in this horrible thing, what led to this person having this terrible behavior, so that we can help it and prevent it in the future. And one good example is pedophiles. So pedophiles obviously is a horrible, horrible thing, and no, we don't want it to happen at all. It's terrible, it causes a ton of damage. But most pedophiles were victims. So at some point we have to understand, where was that switch where they became a perpetrator instead of a victim? How can we intercept that? What's going on in the brain? Where is the point where we can have prevented them turning into a perpetrator? So, you know, there's a million examples, but I don't like it when we talk about humans like they're some sort of, you know, mystical creature, evil creature. It just doesn't make sense to me.
That is a good hot take. I like that one. I have definitely been guilty of saying the monster thing. I might have even just said it about the person who said killed their kids.
I did too, but, you know.
Where I'm like, ooh, what a monster. But, like, that's true. I think that is a well-founded, logical hot take. That's like, yeah, these are humans. They may have monstrous behaviors.
Right.
Very disturbed people.
But like you said, we're very complicated people. We're not always the worst part of ourselves.
Yeah.
We're, you know, we love, we do good things, we do horrible things. You know, we're three-dimensional people. We have to hone in on that bad behavior and see what's going on there.
Yeah. Not condoning serial killing.
No.
But my first hot take this is top of mind because Mother's Day is coming up, but really this is for all holidays, but especially the ones like Mother's Day, Father's Day,
Siblings Day,
Grandparents' Day, even Valentine's Day, I'm sorry. These holidays seem extremely arbitrary to me, and they can cause a lot of stress for people like me who, like, sometimes I don't always know how to, like, show affection or appreciation in a way that is receivable by, like, other people, normal people. Sometimes I totally forget about these holidays. Like, you can sometimes feel like a shitty person if you did not remember Mother's Day was coming up this Sunday, day after tomorrow, and you didn't get anything for your mom. And sorry, Mom.
Or if you keep remembering at the wrong times, and then, oh shit, it's tomorrow and it's too late to do anything.
Yes. So, like, there's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of, like, why are we celebrating? Like, to me, I'm like, I'm a mom.
Yeah.
I have a mom. Like, I feel like my kid's just, like, showing me love and appreciation, like, around the whole year in general.
And we don't need holidays, because if you are being a good, daughter or parent or partner or whatever, you're showing them all the time.
Yeah.
So if you actually need a holiday to tell somebody how you feel, maybe you should get better about telling them how they feel on a regular basis.
I hate it. I feel like it's just like people being like, you need to celebrate this day, and then we're celebrating it that day, not because we feel the thing, but because we were told we need to celebrate the thing. So I went to Trader Joe's this morning to pick up a couple things, and it was packed with flowers. To me, I was like, this is so silly.
Yeah.
This is such a, and I feel like as time goes on, the importance that's placed on these holidays is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like, for Mother's Day, get your mom this. For Mother's Day, get your mom that. I'm like, how about I just tell my mom I love her all the time?
Yeah,
and
right.
like, not leave it for a certain day.
And I feel like social media, particularly Instagram, has exacerbated that, because everybody's got their little crafts. Oh, you should do this for Mother's Day. And every company and every business, oh, here's a Mother's Day idea. And and it adds so much pressure. And I think this is super, super relatable for ADHD, because we have rejection sensitivity. So when someone doesn't give us something, or even sometimes when they do and we don't feel like it's enough, like, do they really love us, and blah, 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 and it wasn't as big as the one that I gave them. So there's that. But then there's also the people pleasing, tons of anxiety, and then like the forgetting of the holidays and like remembering at the very last minute. There's the impulse buys of all the goddamn decorations, and all the little, and feeling like you need to do the decorating of the cookies and the coloring of the eggs.
God, thank God my kids are too old to do Easter anymore. I'm just like, no, every year. So, and being a parent too, you're sort of like societally obligated, because you want your kids to have the experience that all of their peers are having. But I've always been so bad at holidays.
Sure.
Thank God, my daughter's stepmom is like really good at holidays, so I'm like, cool, she's getting like the nonchalant experience over here, like the non-conventional, and then she gets the very conventional experience at her dad's house. But I've noticed my kids both being neurodivergent, that they both kind of have the same vibe about holidays.
Oh, that's good.
That we've always been sort of unconventional as a family that way, but like the pressure, like I don't need more things to worry about, more tasks.
And the trinkets.
Yeah, I don't need stuff, like, it's cool, like, if my kid wants to, like, draw me a picture or make me something cute, that's cool. Like, that's the most important thing, because I'm like, cool, you, like, spent time making this, and that's awesome, but, like...
We don't need more stuff in this house.
Yeah, I don't need people to buy me things. That brings up the thing about gift giving and exchanging, where I really relate, again, to Sheldon Cooper. There's, like, so many episodes of The Big Bang Theory where he's just, like, so confused about gift giving, and he's like, it's pointless. I buy you a gift for your birthday. You buy me a gift for my birthday. Yeah, I buy you a gift for your birthday. Like, can't we just buy ourselves the things that we want, basically, and, like, call it a day?
Right. We're adults, we buy the things that we want anyway, so.
I enjoy it more when someone's like, I saw this thing that made me think of you,
Totally.
I bought it. Instead of like someone giving me like a candle.
Ceremonial,
Not that I don't like candles, but like someone giving me, that's just like something easy that you would buy for anyone, where you're like, oh, I'll get them a candle. Or like a gift card, where it's like, here, because it's a holiday and I was obligated to buy you something. And it like doesn't make any sense. And then one more thing about this, we're getting long-winded on this one, but there's a lot to say. But it's also very triggering, those types of holidays for certain people. Valentine's Day, a lot of people get sad if they're single. Father's Day has been hard for me because I have a complicated relationship with my dad. So it's like, these types of holidays, even birthdays, guys. It's just like, it can be really, really hard for some people.
Especially if you're neurodivergent, there is impulsivity, there's addiction, or you're prone to addiction, and emotional dysregulation. And that stuff, just leads to dysfunction. So we're just more prone to dysfunction in general. So the likelihood that you have problematic family trauma It's pretty high.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree. I've actually gone from one spectrum to the other. Like, I'm totally understimulated, and as a kid I just loved every single holiday because it comes with all the colors and it comes with all the crafts and and I love unwrapping gifts and wrapping gifts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as I became an adult, I was like, there is so much obligation and so many opportunities to mess up and forget and apologize and
it's pointless. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
We keep doing this every year? Like, can we have holidays like every 3 years? That would be fine.
It doesn't seem like anyone really enjoys it.
Right.
You don't hear anyone around Christmas time being like, oh my gosh, so much fun. Everyone's like bitching about how crowded the stores are and how expensive everything is and how they have to go to this in-laws house and they hate this person and they have to, oh my God, I have to make this thing and no one's helping in the kitchen. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? Why don't we just stop doing it? I don't know.
Do you know how many times I've told my family, I don't want anything, and I'm not being coy, I do not want anything. If you really feel a burning desire to do something for me, donate the money to Eden Reforestation, because they'll plant a tree for 15 cents, so your money goes a long way, and I feel great.
Yeah.
But please do not get me things. I don't have money, I can't give you anything, I'm gonna feel super shitty, and I know you don't have money, and whatever you get me, I'm probably not gonna like it, it's just gonna sit and collect dust, please don't get me anything. Of course, they all go, oh, okay, yeah, we understand, and then they get me stuff.
Yeah.
So, don't be that person.
Except if it's socks. You can always get me socks. Your second hot take.
Oh, my second hot take is that I want to be careful how I say this. I don't want to say that stimulants aren't addictive, but this whole like, ooh, let's be super careful about prescribing stimulants because they're addictive. Stimulants help impulsivity. They keep people from craving dopamine and seeking out dopamine. I was a binge eater. I am not a binge eater on my Adderall. I refrain from gambling when I'm on Adderall. There's so many addictions that I'm not prone to when I'm on Adderall. On top of that, I forget to take my Adderall if I don't have a routine. And that's a very common thing with ADHD, is that we forget to take our meds. But the whole like addictive thing, yes, there are some people who have been addicted to it. It's people who abuse it. So we're talking about people who are snorting them and neurotypicals who are using them who don't need them. I'm not going to say that no ADHDer's been addicted to their meds, but not as prescribed. Like, if you take your stimulant as prescribed, it's going to help you with your addictions. And there's plenty of actual ADHD expert professional doctors who support me on this. It's too big of a common stigma in the medical field that so more doctors are afraid than not to prescribe stimulants because they think that we're all going to get hooked on them. But they're our medication. We need them to function. So, like, you wouldn't deprive a paraplegic of his wheelchair, so I think we really need to hack away at that stigma.
Yeah.
It's extremely concerning because we're so prone to addiction, and I've lost too many wonderful people to addiction, and I know that they probably could have been helped if they were properly medicated, but people are so afraid to prescribe them now that we're losing people to the streets unnecessarily, and it needs to stop.
Slow clap for that one. Okay, going from that serious topic to my second hot take. Clothing. My hot take on clothing. Here's the thing. A lot of neurodivergent people have very specific preferences and aversions and hang-ups. I don't say hang-ups in a bad way, but just it's a reality we have hang-ups about clothing. And a lot of times, societally, people are expected to present themselves a certain way or expected to conform to these norms that are also arbitrary, where it's like, my daughter likes to wear basically like the same outfit every day.
Cartoons wear the same thing every day.
But that's a preference that a lot of autistic people have, where it's like, oh, I have this one outfit and it's very good for me in many ways. So I'm just going to buy like 20 of these shirts. Clothing has been a struggle for me because I want to follow the rules. I want to portray myself in a certain way, right? But that doesn't always align with how I'm feeling inside. So getting dressed for me is always really hard because I know what I want to wear, but it's conflicting with me thinking about what I should wear. And then when there's rules like I'm starting a new job soon and I have the corporate, I'm a nurse, so I wear scrubs at work. And there's the corporate orientation part where she was like, oh, we need you to dress business casual for an entire week. And I'm like, first, you got to be more specific because that means different things to different people. And she listed it off of like all of the requirements, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like immediately panicking because I'm like, I don't feel like I have the clothes that fit. Like, I'm not a business person.
Right,
like, I don't automatically, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go shopping. And then she's like, or you can wear scrubs. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna wear scrubs. Why don't you lead with that? Like, I'm at worse. So yeah, clothes and like how we should look and how people judge us by what we're wearing. You know, arguably one of the most intelligent people of our generation, Steve Jobs, wore the same thing every day.
Yeah.
And people would comment on it, you know, people noticed, people thought it was odd.
But then eventually we all got used to it and we thought it was, you know, just part of his like character, you know, we embraced it.
Yeah.
And I think we can do that with everybody.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, I wouldn't personally want to wear the same thing every day because I do like expressing myself through clothing, and clothing can be like a really nice, like, experience. But also then there's the other side of my brain that's like, am I doing this right? And how are other people seeing me? And I don't like that. Like, I don't like worrying about that kind of stuff, but I'm a human. And
I have a big struggle with fashion, and it's because I have very specific tastes. I love bright colors, and I end up wearing kids' clothes, and I don't like the things that are in style, and I will go in and I will get super frustrated and go cry in my, I will go into like H&M and look around at what they have, and I don't like any of the new styles, and I will go in my car and cry because there's nothing pink, there's nothing blue, there's nothing, you know, brightly colored, there's nothing that speaks to me, and I don't, fitting in and looking cool or hip is not enough of a motivator for me.
Yeah,
I need to be stimulated by my clothes. So.
Yeah, and for me it's more of a comfort thing. Like, I want to be comfortable, and I'm comfortable in a very specific style and type. Like, not just comfortable, like physically comfortable, but I have to like feel good about what I'm wearing. I'm really weird about like things looking too new. Like, I bought a new pair of shoes and I hate that they look new. I'm like, these shoes are too new. I have a pair of Converse, on the other hand, that I've been wearing for probably almost a decade, and like the sole is almost falling off, and they're my favorite shoes because they're comfortable and used to them, and they don't look new. And like, same thing, maybe it's because I grew up in the grunge decade where I'm like, put holes in my clothes. One of my favorite little like jacket things has like a bunch of holes in it that weren't like intentionally put there. It's just an old jacket, and I'm like, I love this jacket because it's all old and it doesn't, and I'm like, it's so weird. I'm like, I don't know why I'm like that, but like that type of attire and like very casual style of dress like doesn't fly in a lot of places. I wish we could all just get dressed in the morning in what we're comfortable in and just exist that way. And I feel sorry for people that are in the corporate world and have to go to like a job every day where they have to like wear a certain thing. Yeah,
I feel that pressure every time I do a trade show, every time I have a meeting with a buyer, every time I do these Zoom meetings. And the hair and makeup too. Like, I hate the fact that I'm expected to wear makeup. I think makeup should just be purely an artistic thing. And the fact that I have pink hair, like, I'm in a professional setting and people ask me about my pink hair, and I'm like, why does it matter? Why does it matter what color my hair is?
Exactly.
And like, why does growing up mean that I have to suddenly be boring? Why does growing up suddenly mean that I have to like mauve and gray and black? Like, why can't I, you know, still like these type ruffles and colors and so I've given pushback on it my whole life, and recently I've been kind of leaning into the whole business casual thing, but it kills my soul. It really does. Like, it pains me to look in the mirror in that kind of clothing, because I go, ugh, that is not you.
Yeah, it's very much a that is not you vibe when I try and dress a certain way, and I like feel uncomfortable the entire time I'm in those clothes because I'm like, this does not feel right.
And you're right, we do totally have major sensory things. Like, when I'm at the height of my stimulants, if I'm not taking my guanfacine and stuff to kind of ramp that down, my sensory issues get crazy, and I will have a full meltdown when I'm putting on like workout clothes because I can't I need a super tight sports bra. It has to feel like I've got a vice grip around me. Otherwise I have just a complete total meltdown. And so, you know, we have to be sensitive to stuff like that. Like,
yeah, exactly. So I think we need to get over our hangups about wardrobes.
Yeah.
Just like let people wear what they want. Let's try not to pass judgment on people. I really try not to look at what someone's wearing and like judge who they are based on that. You don't know. Like, you don't know. Same thing with tattoos, you know. People are like, oh, you know,
I like that we're getting more more welcoming of tattoos. In fact, I saw a tattoo on a flight attendant the other day, and I complimented her because I was so glad to see that. Yeah. Because my mom was a flight attendant, and I know that it was like, you have to have this tie, and your hair has to be pulled back, and it was very like rigid. We have aesthetics that we have to follow, you know. And now they're like, yeah, tattoos. Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah, my new job in our employee handbook, it says if there's, again, a very vague term, excessive tattooing needs to be covered. And I'm like, okay, what's considered excessive? I have a feeling this is going to be considered excessive. So am I going to have to wear a freaking cover
Look
up
this
sleeve,
up.
and I just think it's dumb. Like, I think if it's not something offensive, like, yeah, if I had like swastikas tattooed on my arm or like
and
a
some guys don't
naked
like
lady,
naked ladies. And
like
stuff.
that could be offensive to some people I know. I'm not offended by naked ladies.
Yeah, it really
Let
comes
people
down to
express
why.
themselves.
Why?
Yeah.
You cannot give me a good reason why. Just because that's the way it is. Nope. That's the way it's always been. Nope. That's not good enough.
Not good enough. Yeah. Time to wrap it up.
Yeah. As usual, if you have anything to say or something to share or something you want us to talk about, please email us. We love to interact with you. And, you know, if you send us something cool you can do, we'll give you a little shout out.
Yeah.
We have one requirement, and that is that you keep it weird.
Yeah. That's not hard to follow.
Have a good one, guys.
Have a good one.
Keep it
Thanks for
weird.
sitting with us.
We will.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.